Hello, Frizzle Flights! Out of the last 30 books I read, the one that I enjoyed the least was Unravel. And in exactly 2 words, this book was emotionally stunted. This is a fantasy novel about Marguerite, a princess in a land that burns witches. And this is a book about her both embracing her magical identity, her parental heritage, fighting against her evil uncle, finding love, and the plot was all pretty good. But what made this book less fun was that I never felt like we really got many emotional reactions. Things would happen, but it felt so flat. Like I never really got to feel what the main character was feeling. And I don't want to scare people off from this book because I do think that there is an audience out there that will love this book. And I think that it is also important in some way because the main character, Marguerite, is deaf. And so that's representation you don't often see as the protagonist in a story. But for me, 2 stars. And just because this book got number 30 on my list doesn't mean it's the worst thing I read, because there's definitely some 1-star books. It's just that sometimes a book is so bad, I start to enjoy it, you know? Because it's fun to hate or analyze critically. Numbers 26 through 29 are the Moon Knight books that I didn't like. I just finished a project where I read so many Moon Knight comics. Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't like. And I have an entire video breaking down all of those in ranked order in more detail. There's a link in the footnotes. But just for this little gaggle of books I didn't like so much, in 4 words, these were dark action without substance. Like, these are the comics where Moon Knight famously cuts off his nemesis's face, but it didn't feel like there were many substantial emotional journeys for these characters to go on. It felt more just like flashy action kind of stories. And though I can appreciate a good action scene, I would also argue that these books didn't have a lot of them because the art was often confusing. So for these comics, on average, they received 1.7 stars. In spot number 25, we have Land of the Dead, 3rd book in the Stoker's Wild series. And in just 4 words, epistolary dictation without tension. The basic premise of this series is that you have Bram Stoker, real-life author of Dracula, and Oscar Wilde, real-life author of Picture of Dorian Gray, and they're both kind of vampire hunters going on adventures with other famous historical people. And like the actual book Dracula, this book is written in the format of journal entries and letters and reports and things like that. And honestly, that format has never really been for me, especially because this book seems to be going for the tone of that very old-timey writing style. It always felt pretty dry and flat to me. I wouldn't call the action boring because you can tell that these writers are going out of their way to make it exciting. But I want to give this book a little bit of praise because when I heard the premise, I definitely was like, oh no, this book is gonna be sexist, isn't it? Because it's trying so hard to channel that late 1800s vibes. And the main characters that the series are named after are both guys. So I was very pleasantly surprised when a lot of the narrators in this book are women and they play an active role, and it was totally great. So if you like epistolary novels, maybe check out this series. I rated this book 2 stars. In spot number 24, we have Something from the Nightside, and in 1 word, quippy. I read this book as part of my ongoing quest of finding books that are similar to Dresden Files in the urban fantasy genre, links in the footnotes as always, and I was pretty excited to read this book, but I was pretty disappointed. The thing that bothered me most about this book is that it felt like every character, but especially the main character, was just ready to give like a quippy poetic speech on the dot. Some character would be like, "What is that?" And then main character would be like, "Let me recite 4 poetic paragraphs of snark to you." And honestly, the only reason why this book makes it so high up here onto the fun reading time list is because it was really short. And that was kind of satisfying to be able to finish this book in what, like 3 hours? And just be like, I rated this book 2 stars. Firestarter by Stephen King. And in 3 words, this book is aimless, not protagonists. So I've been on a journey to get into Stephen King books because I want to. This is my 3rd attempt. My first attempt, I made it like 10% in and gave up. My second attempt, I finished the book but didn't really like it. This book, I made it halfway before I just gave up and finally said, 3 strikes, you're out. I think I am done trying to force myself to like Stephen King. My brain and his writing style just don't mesh. And that moment of just finally letting myself give up was so satisfying, which is why it gets all the way up to this spot. But the reason that I didn't like this book, and honestly most other Stephen King books, is the feeling of the lack of structure, of the aimlessness of the plots, of characters just feeling like they're doing things without actually being active protagonists, that everyone is just like reacting to each other. And it's just not entertaining to me. In this book, Firestarter, we follow a little girl and her father. The little girl has powers to start fires, float objects, etc. Father has a little bit of telepathic mind control abilities. They're being chased by a shady government organization who wants to capture and or kill them. And it's getting another movie adaptation soon. I rated this book 1 star, and I am so glad to just be done with that project. I gave Stephen King 3 chances, 3 strikes. Knowing myself, I'll probably try again in like 5 years. I just can't leave it alone. I want to like these popular authors. Number 22 is Beneath the Dark. And in 4 words, efficient dictation, creepy mystery. On a secluded British island in the 1990s. People are being attacked, weird mold is showing up, they call in a paranormal investigator. What I most appreciated about this book was how efficient it was. I know usually the rule is show, don't tell, but this book is short, and we've got a lot of characters and narrators to introduce. So oftentimes, the book just kind of, in an entertaining way, tells us a character's backstories, their loves, their wants, etc. And honestly, it was really refreshing and kept the pace up, and I was never bored or felt overly info dumped too. The reason that I didn't have the super best time with this book is because it felt like it was so steeped in 1990s nostalgia, in small isolated island nostalgia. The sense of setting was so strong and such like a part of the story, and I just couldn't relate. And so it ranks pretty low on my list, but if that sounds like a thing that you could relate to, I would honestly recommend it. I rated this book 3 stars. In spot number 21, we have Unsouled. And in 2 words, this book is underdog setup. I've heard a lot of good things about this series, but I've also heard so many times that the series gets better, which also sometimes means that the book 1 is the weakest of the series. And after reading this book 1, I believe it. Like, the bones of a great epic fantasy, really interesting series is all here. But when I got to the end of book 1, I was like, okay, 3 stars. And I think the reason that I felt that way when I got to the end of book 1 was it kind of felt like all set up for the larger series. And it was like setup on top of setup on top of setup. Because first we get, here's your main character, he's an underdog who doesn't have the magic that pretty much everyone else can access. And then he gets his inciting incident, he starts learning new skills, etc. When you're already halfway through the book, there is new, larger inciting incident where it's like, no, actually, there's interdimensional space battle that he's now involved in with time travel and stuff. And I'm like, what? And then by the end of the book, there's like a new call to action and adventure where they're leaving the ordinary world again. And underneath that, there is a more typical structure, but it definitely felt like that. It felt like I was reading an Act 1 for the entire series, which in of itself didn't make it the most satisfying book to read. And I plan to continue the series because I've heard from so many people that it keeps getting better. But honestly, if I hadn't heard that, I wouldn't be attached enough to continue the series. You know what I mean? So I guess continue with me in future videos to figure out what I think of the next few books. In number 20, we have An Alchemist and an Amaretto, which is book 5 of the 𝐂𝐇𝐀𝐏𝐄𝐑𝐒 series. And in 1 word, this book is stale? I really loved books 1, 2, 3, and then by book 4 I was like, it's good, I'll keep reading, and then by book 5 I was like, I think I'm done with this series. And why is that? And I think the biggest thing about this for me is that I don't feel like the relationships between the characters change that much, or honestly are very well shown on screen. Don't get me wrong, these books are fast-paced, they have great exposition, and the characters are interesting. But from book to book, we're just kind of told, these characters are best friends, and by book 5, I'm still not really buying it. They more just feel like protagonists, they hang out together and sometimes flirt, but sometimes not, you know. And honestly, if someone just had given me the entire series and I had them all ready and I could just binge them, I probably would have, because they're fun to read. But the fact that I had to wait for the next one to come to me from the library and I had holds and stuff, that gave me just enough breathing room to say, do I really want to continue this series when there are so many other good books to read? And the answer that came back from myself to myself was, not really. But like I said, it's still fun to read. I gave it 3 stars. In spots number 18 and 19, we have Skyward by Brandon Sanderson and Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I read it twice in a row. Let me explain why. In 2 words, this book is cleverly misdirectional. So the thing that I really appreciated while reading this book is the way that the author sets up alternate plot lines. And sometimes does not, take them, which makes this book feel really unpredictable while I was reading it. Because when you're reading a book and the character is like, this is my dream, and then you get an alternate option, and then oh, they're gonna fail in their dream and get the alternate option. Well, in this book, sometimes the alternate option is taken and sometimes not, and sometimes it's a mix of the two, and sometimes it's in a way you didn't expect. And just the fact that there are so many of these little red herring plotline kernels that are presented to us made it really fun. I rated this book 4 stars. And now, the reread story. So I went on a road trip vacation thing with my family, and you know what that means. It was time for me to read a book aloud to everyone. And this is the book I picked. So I read it first for myself, and then I read it again out loud to my family. So these are the reviews from the Frizzle family. It was great. Fun, multi-layered. Fun, exciting, and funny. Amazing world building. Scudding good character writing. They all really loved it, and now they're all reading book 2. Without me, I have not read book 2 yet. I'll get around to it. There are so many books to read, okay? In spots 9 through 17, we have all of the Moon Knight comics that I enjoyed. So in 4 words, when Moon Knight is at his best in these comics, they are insightful, dramatic, playful, psychedelic. Moon Knight is a comic book character who has just gotten his own TV show. I'm very excited about that. And his superhero origins are rooted in Egyptian mythology, where he has a patron deity named Khonshu, god of the moon, who gives him a little bit of powers and resurrects him now and then. And Moon Knight's adventures can get pretty wacky crazy pretty quick, with Moon Knight sometimes not knowing what to believe, reality or not, with people sometimes trusting him and sometimes not, but always him pursuing his mission above all else, and it is that fanatical determination where I would say that it's pretty valid to compare him to Batman, though other members of the fandom would disagree with me. Sorry, not sorry. There are so many comics in this bundle that I just absolutely love. And for me, in order to love a comic, you need good art and good writing. And some of these are absolutely fantastic. I could talk about these comics for hours, and I did when prepping for and recording my Moon Knight video, which is linked in the footnotes. I rated these comics an average of 3.2 stars. In spot number 8, we have The Observer Effect. And in 3 stars, this book is emotionally, paradoxically brave. This is a time travel book. It's 3rd in a series, but I didn't read books 1 and 2. I know, I'm a little chaos demon, but there's no book police to stop me. And I kind of enjoy the experience. Because it gives me little puzzles to figure out as I go, What happened in books 1 and 2? And this book, it turned out, was such a good fit for that. Because the series has such good consequences from book to book. You can tell that there are ripples from decisions that our main character made in earlier books that are coming through to bite him. And sometimes to give him a leg up. This book is about Joseph Bridgman, novice time traveler who was just being kind of recruited into the time travel police slowly. And in this book, he goes on a mission to 1873 Paris to save a composer who was burned in a famous opera house fire there. For me, in order for a book to be fantastic, it has to have a nice balance of the action plot being exciting and well-paced, and also us taking time to understand the emotional life of the character. Why they're feeling what they're feeling, why they're doing what they're doing. How is that affecting them on a moment-by-moment basis and a larger plot basis? How are they changing? And this book had it all. And on top of it, it had fun time travel adventures, dynamic characters. It was so very good. I give this book 5 stars. In spot number 7, we have the Aeronaut's Windlass. And in 3 words, complicated, contrasting characters. If you want to hear all about me going from hating to loving this book, there's an entire video where I talk about that journey, linked in the footnotes. But here we go in a little summarized version. Some of the characters in this book start off so unlikably proud and brash and just ugh. I was just absolutely hating reading from their perspective. But then slowly, over the course of this book, I both learned how to root for them to overcome their character flaws and to cheer them on when they could use their character flaws to actually help further the plot and help other characters. And it was just the perfect, complicated balance. This book is steampunk fantasy. There are airships, there are magic crystals, there are talking sentient cats, there are teenagers coming of age, and adults with complicated romantic histories. And they all come together with believable relationships, fun friendships, and rivalries. This book repeatedly pushes pretty much every single character out of their comfort zone, and you get to see them change and grow, and sometimes stumble and fail. But overall, this is a very happy, fun book, and it was the last book of Jim Butcher's books that I had to read. I have now read all the books, and I can't officially say he's like my favorite author. I just love him! They're so good! Ugh. I rated this book 4 stars. In number 6, we have A Far Wilder Magic. And in 4 words, this book is romance through character growth. Now, one of my favorite books is The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. And this book is the closest I have ever come to a book just like that one. The settings of vaguely magical early 1900s, got it. The dual guy-girl narrators who both have their own interesting plots that intermingle, got it. The strong emotional arcs that both characters go on, it's got it. What I loved about this is these 2 characters definitely have a romance, but it's done in the most perfect way, where it's not just like, oh, we just met, we have chemistry, kiss kiss, smooch smooch. True love. The way that they bond is through overcoming their own emotional hurdles, because they both have real trouble opening up to each other. And it's only through them learning how to trust each other, how to trust others, how to gain confidence in themselves, finding what they really want versus what they need, that they're finally compatible and can help each other grow. And that's the most satisfying kind of romance to read. And now, don't misjudge this book. The romance was my favorite part of it, but it also has a very strong main plot of a magic demon killer fox, a competition to kill it, various family drama. This book is just gold. I rated it 5 stars. And in spots 1 through 5 of the last 30 books I read, ranked by how much fun I had reading them, is the Heartstriker series. And in just 2 words, refreshingly wholesome. This series follows 2 main characters. One is Julian the Dragon, who has recently been disowned-ish by his dragon family for not being mean enough. And so he kind of makes it his mission to, as his teenage rebellion, be as nice as possible, and it's adorable and engaging and really active character choices. The other main character is Marcy, who is a just out of college mage trying to make her own in the world, as she also gets hunted down by the magical mob for various things. Their worlds collide, they have to stop the apocalypse, you know how it goes. I'm not gonna say that these books don't get sad sometimes, but for the most part, they are refreshingly wholesome. They're just fun to read. Because at the heart, this series is a lot about, well, the power of friendship, the power of trusting people, of making allies, of learning things, of applying your skills. And it's got a really interesting our world but a little twist kind of setting, where it's a little bit futuristic, and also a little bit post-apocalyptic, and also a little bit fantastical. This is the book I had the most fun while reading, because while the pacing was fantastic and the characters were likable, it was just, you know, one of those fun books. Because it's trying to explore that space where being kind can become a superpower. And I would recommend these books to anyone looking for that kind of fun fantasy book. I rated these books on average 4.6 stars. And let me know in the comments what kind of books you've been reading. I love to design t-shirts, so if you're interested in checking out some book-themed ones, go check out my store. There's a link in the footnotes. And thank you for watching.